Hi, folks. I wanted to talk a little bit more about the election of 1920. A remarkable presidential election. It's one of the more unique ones, and one of the reasons for its uniqueness. First off, you had Warren G. Harding running. You had James Cox running, who lived very close to each other, who sounded very much alike. They had, in many respects, many similar thoughts. They were both newspaper men. But also the other thing was that James Cox was saddled with Woodrow Wilson. And that was a big problem. Warren G. Harding had been senator. Warren G. Harding had been very vocal, and Warren G. Harding had received a lot of positive support from Theodore Roosevelt. And I think, just my personal view, that Theodore Roosevelt was very strongly eyeing up the presidential election of 1920. And I am of a thought that he was possibly, there was a lot of talk about this, having Warren G. Harding as his running mate. What an interesting ticket that might have been. It would have been interesting to see Theodore Roosevelt had he lived as a more mature man. Maybe he had slowed down a little bit. He had grown up a little bit. I have to tell you, you have to remember with Theodore Roosevelt having gone through the election of 1912, which was a travesty. Theodore Roosevelt was brilliant, and when he was president from 1901 until 1909, he had done some amazing things. But the thing about Theodore Roosevelt was, and his daughter said, he wanted to be the bride at every wedding, the corpse at every funeral, and the infant at every baptism. I mean, he had to be the center of attention. And during the election of 1912, he wasn't. And he didn't know how to handle it. And so he lost it. He actually went crazy and did some very bizarre and unusual things. There was also an assassination attempt on him in 1912. And, of course, he basically alienated himself from the party. So by 1920, Theodore Roosevelt had learned his lesson. And it was going to prove to be a very interesting year because of another thing. Women got the vote. And, as it would turn out, in 1920, you had Warren G. Harding, which made many a post-Edwardian woman, an early flapper, made their heart flutter. He was looked upon as very handsome. He looked like a president, if you think about it. Warren G. Harding had that look. And obviously a lot of women thought so. And a lot of women would vote for Warren G. Harding. And the other part of this whole thing is you have Woodrow Wilson in the background, like a raven, nevermore, basically dampening the Democratic ticket. As I've mentioned before, his son-in-law was interested in running, and there was no endorsement. Cox barely got any kind of endorsement from Wilson, because first off, Wilson wanted to run again. You have to understand how sick this man was. He had been sick for so many years, and yet he continued to try to control and manipulate the entire scene so he could stay in control. It got so bad that Woodrow Wilson had lost it so badly that when he rode in his car and a vehicle passed him, he wanted to pull them over and give them traffic tickets. This is the physical condition of Woodrow Wilson by 1920. So 1920 was a pivotal year because the world was sick of what had happened. The war to end all wars was basically going to create 1 million more. And the high-mindedness of Wilson became his whole downfall because He went into the Treaty of Versailles and went about much of his life like a prophet. He was, a Presbyterian minister's son. And he knew he was going to change everyone. And through his naive nature, the world changed him in ways he never dreamed. Because with Woodrow Wilson, as I have said, he was like a dry stick. And if you bend a dry stick, it doesn't bend, it breaks. And that's where we were in 1920. A really remarkable, very strange election that would bring us Warren G. Harding and actually rescue America from the international view it had had for many, many years, and it got a chance to rest, relax, and of course the Roaring Twenties came where it learned to enjoy itself.